Hey, everybody. It's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about MSU's 86-72 victory over Bowling Green. Before we start the show, a quick reminder to leave a written review of the show on your podcast player. It really helps a ton and costs you only a few seconds of your time. So we really appreciate that. Well, Rod, this was kind of a weird game, I thought, in some ways. Bowling Green came out of the gate in the first half and just could miss. I mean, whether it was from two or for three or free throw line, they were just knocking everything down. And I think it was almost midway through the first half, and Bowling Green had the rebounding at just 5-1 because there weren't even really hardly any misses. And Fierce had the rebound for Michigan State. And the Spartans trailed by as much as 12 in the half, but went on a 10-0 run to close out things and making a tie game going to halftime at 43. And then it kind of looked like they were going to take over the game coming out of halftime, took a little bit of a lead, and then the Falcons came back. And to their credit, I mean, they battled back, kept the game close until were leading by up as I think as many as 10 with under 10 to go. And it was looking a little bit kind of just like one of those weird games that looked like Michigan State wasn't going to pull it out. But then some gritty play, free throws by Michigan State. They battled back and ended up finishing the last 4 minutes of the game on an 18-0 run to win by 14 and make it look like it wasn't a close game. But this is a game that was very much in doubt for majority of the game. And again, I don't think, aside from Michigan State not being able to hit from outside, not a game they think they played that poorly. Just Bowling Green just played really well. I think they're a
Well,
better team. I think that think we anticipated, at least than I anticipated.
it was a combination of a lot of different things. So, and how much weight you give any of them is to some extent the eye of the beholder.
Sure.
Um, so we'll try to sort through them. Let's start first with Bowling Green. We knew coming in they had been blistering hot from three.
Right.
So that this was a team that, at least in the early going, had demonstrated an ability to hit jumpers. But I'm going to take a mea culpa. We talked about Marcus Johnson, and that's because I was relying on the profile that he had in their first three games. Said, look, despite the fact this guy's 6'7", 265, and by the way, 265 is generous. He might be three bills. He's
Yeah,
close.
I think so.
But we said, yeah, he's shooting like whatever he was, 57% from
Yeah,
three. It's a
11 for
lot of
21
perimeter
or
stuff.
something. Yeah.
I don't know that he's really the kind of player that you would assume he would be from his physical tools, but he does have that element in his game. I mean, we saw him really go to work in the post on a variety, pretty much anybody Michigan. I didn't think Michigan State ever had a great answer.
No.
I think I would probably lean toward Carson Cooper being the guy that guarded him the best, which maybe isn't a big surprise because he's got the best footwork and the most length, the best combination of those two things among the guys that guarded him. But, look, that guy he was 8 for 13 on twos. Now, he was 1 for 11 on threes.
Right.
So the overall number is 9 for 24, which you say, well, you can live with that any day of the week. And that's true. But especially in the first half, there were stretches where he was just torturing Michigan State. And I'm going to be honest. If he goes an entire season hitting shots like some of the shots he hit, where he's fading away from 15 feet on the baseline,
Yes.
putting up a rainbow jumper, and it goes, okay, hats off. If he can now, it sounds like Bowling Green believes that he can do that, because on the broadcast, they were saying that Todd Simon is insisting he thinks Johnson might be the best shooter in America. That's probably hyperbolic no matter which way you slice it, but it does suggest that at least they are confident that he can hit those shots. And you saw him do some up and under moves in the post. He hit a couple half hooks. It was a variety of stuff. Very tough cover. And remember, this is a guy we talked about coming up from the D2 ranks.
Right.
And our discussion was, this is something that has changed in the last decade in the sport, and you are seeing more and more guys pulling this off. Well, here's Exhibit A. This guy's he's all over social media, and I don't just mean Michigan State social media. He's all over social media now because the Michigan State game is watched by a lot of people who aren't Michigan State fans and certainly aren't Bowling Green fans. And this is their first look at this guy. And if this is your first look, you're like, wow, this guy's a real player, and he is. but we shouldn't be surprised. He came in averaging 17 plus a game. So
Yeah.
the fact that he scored 23, not a shocker. I thought this. I give Bowling Green, without getting to foreshadow what we're going to talk about in regard to the keys. This is a team that I think it's very important for them to shoot threes well.
Yeah.
And I think Michigan State's defensive game plan reflected that. Bowling Green went 5 for 26 from three. So believe it or not, Michigan State actually outshot them from three by 1%. As poorly as they shot, they were a little better than Bowling Green. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way Michigan State defended. But, Izzo mentioned afterward that he felt in the first half it was a combination of some poor execution by his players, but also a couple of things in terms of their pick and roll coverage that they needed to adjust. We can't speak to that.
Yeah.
I'd have to rewatch the game to see if we could pick up what they were doing differently. But so we'll assume it was a combination of those two things. In a general sense, though, my observation was I think Michigan State came out and looked so focused on taking away good looks from three that their guards didn't balance that well enough with being able to also contain penetration.
Yeah.
Because especially once Bowling Green was in that flurry you mentioned, they made a few jumpers early. The next phase was Michigan State, I think, trying to take those shots away even more, and Bowling Green's guards going by them.
Yeah, give them layups, and then no one comes to help because they're worried about the guys on the line. If they come to be wide open. Yeah,
give Bowling Green credit for executing that and for making plays when they had opportunities to make plays. When you say they might be better than we were giving them credit for, based on this game, I would say yes. Based on a game like this, I would say, well, that team's probably going to shoot better than 5 for 26, almost ending it from three, almost any other time they go out there, because they're not going to be guarded that well the way Michigan State did for starters. And then they're probably going to be luckier too. And if they could shore that up, sure, that looks like a team that could compete in the MAC, but we don't know because all these teams are so new that, they're 4 games in, just like Michigan State is. I would say this. I think there is the potential for that to be a pretty good MAC team. Where that slots them into the standings, I guess I would say they were picked 5th out of 12 preseason. That doesn't seem crazy to me at all based on what I saw. And they might be better than that. Who knows? But we don't know for sure. All we can do is evaluate based on what we saw. And it looks to me like a good, capable team at the mid-major level. Michigan State, offensively, look, there's one problem here, and it's a big one.
Yeah.
It's a big one. I'm not trying to say, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters, but there's one problem. And if anybody is thinking that the fact that 3-point shots are not falling means that the offense is not functioning well, you are incorrect. And I've got some numbers for you. So Michigan State right now, its turnover percentage is 79th in the country. That would be the second best number of the Tom Izzo era to last season. But they're doing it at a much faster pace. They are currently 60, and this is including tonight's game. They're currently 63rd in average length of offensive possession. So 79th when you're playing fast. Last year, when their average offensive possession length was 210th in the country, they were 53rd in turnover percentage. I will take that balance this year, what we've seen so far. They are clearly playing faster. No question.
Yeah, right.
Offensive rebounding. After tonight, where they did a very good job, which we'll return to, they are 40th in the country in offensive rebounding rate. Last year, 144th. The year before that, 213th.
Right.
They are getting second chances. Free throw attempts as a percentage of free throw attempts divided by field goal attempts, which is one way of measuring how often you're getting to the line. They are currently 88th in the country. Last year, 276th. The year before, 316th. The year before that, they were 186th. So they were pretty good. Again, they're 88th right now. The percentage of their total scoring that's coming via free throws is 25.3%, which is good enough for 45th in the country. So they are getting to the line at a clip that we don't ever see
and
from
scoring
a Michigan State team, and converting, because the free throw percentage as a team, you ready for this? 80%. That puts them 23rd in the country right now. Here's another one that is not getting, and we haven't even talked about it that much, because in part it's a function of a couple of the things we have spent a lot of time talking about, which is the ability and persistence in getting into transition, and the fact that they are attacking, they're playing downhill more frequently. Their 2-point percentage. So this is the percentage of shots they're hitting inside the arc. They are currently 79th in the country. Now you might say, well, that's okay. That's not, it's not unbelievable, but it's good. Last year, 171st. The year before that, 269th. The year before that, 184th. The year before that, 241st. The last time they were any good was Cassius Winston's senior year. They were 47th. Okay. So these are all the things I've just run down are ways in which you can statistically measure the improvement, admittedly, through 4 games. It's not through 30 games. It's a portion of the season. But this is a team offensively, I would say this. Right now, they are one of the 10 worst three-point shooting teams in the country.
Yeah.
They are 357th. They're shooting 20%, which is exactly what they shot tonight. If you think that's where they're going to finish or somewhere around there, that's going to be something they have to overcome on a nightly basis, and that's not good. I don't believe that. And I think the fact that three-point shooting is, and we talk about this all the time, at least in part, there is a luck variable to that, much more so than these other areas we're talking about. So what are the odds that the three-point shooting gets shored up to some extent, and I would argue probably fairly considerably? I'd say the odds of that happening are pretty good. If all the other things I just went through stay somewhere consistently around roughly where they are now, and you add improved three-point shooting to one degree or another, this is going to go from being what now is offensive efficiency, they're 66th.
It's pretty good, but
it's okay. It's not where you want to finish. If you're Michigan State, your goal, if you're going to be the kind of team you want to be, your goal is to be, I think, solidly top 30. But that three-point shooting is the total drag on that. If you had even average three-point shooting, say they were shooting 32% from three as a team instead of 20, you would absolutely have a top 30 offense.
Yeah.
No question. Because literally everything else, those of you who look at KenPom, there's green, like bright shade of green is excellent in a category. And then it goes all the way to red being apocalyptically bad. And then there are shades in between. Everything offensively is green except that bright, shining red in three-point shooting. Everything else is green.
Yeah.
So, that's, and I think tonight, once again, that was the story. I think that offensively, they were really good in a lot of ways. They were really horrible shooting the three. But the really good in all those other areas overcame that. And I'll agree, too, with what you said about it. Clearly, a 14-point margin was flattering. That was not a 14-point
Oh, yeah, for
game.
sure. Yeah.
Bowling Green played better than that. It was much more competitive than that. But again, I know people want to wallow in misery, but I'm not doing that because I'm seeing. Now, I was actually not happy at all with the defense in the first half. I thought that was actually a problem. They've been
Hmm.
pretty good. I would say, what have they played? They played 8 halves of basketball. I'd say they've been pretty good defensively in 7 of them. And that's borne out. They're currently number 16 in defensive efficiency nationally.
Yeah.
Um, that's despite the fact that opponents are shooting an insane 78.6% from the line against them. I don't think Bowling Green missed tonight, or maybe they missed
They had
one.
one miss at the very end of the
Okay.
game. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's crazy, but Michigan State is rebounding very well defensively. They're not fouling people, which is also something that often has been a problem for Michigan State teams. And their percentage against half court offense, the percentage against is actually very good. They're 74th against threes. They're 59th against twos. That's an important number because that number should be sustainable. There's a lot to like. There's one clear issue from game to game to game to game that you don't like, but it just comes down to, it's like stocks, right? Do you have the patience? Do you have the time to outlast this downturn and to have what we would call fundamentals kick in? I think they're going to, but the question is, when does that happen? And do they take, this is a game that, let's be honest, they could have taken a loss here.
Oh yeah.
And if they did, yes, you would look at the defense in that first half as a big part of it. That would probably be my lead story. But you would also have to say, well, the 3-point shooting once again really sunk you. If it had been better against Kansas, you probably get a win there. It would be partially responsible for a loss in this game. The other thing I would say, and then we can move on, is in the midst of all that 4 for 20, I will say it was a big deal, in my opinion, for Jaden Akins to hit that 3 that he did late.
Yeah.
It turned the game from a 1 possession to a 2 possession game, 2 possession lead. And it came off exactly the kind of plays you want, the kind of action you want to see. It was Jace Richardson driving into the teeth of the defense, into the lane, forcing the defense to collapse on him, and then finding Jaden on the arc, and he drained it. I think it was a big shot potentially for Jaden, who, other than his shooting, was outstanding today. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
And also the fact that Jace Richardson made that play, I thought was really encouraging. They've been getting good looks anyway. It's not like, oh, there's been a shortage of both. But I thought in a big moment, on a day when you're struggling again, to come up with that play and to convert it, hopefully that's something that drives their confidence collectively as a group, and they get that shooting, that deep shooting, turned around. Because, man, if they do, this becomes potentially a very good offensive team, despite the fact that I don't think very many people want to hear that right now, because they want to wallow in misery.
Right. Yeah, well, it's a rough football season right now, and you want to see this team to
That's
really
not
take.
helping. That's not.
It's not helping, right? It's not helping the psyche for Spartan fans. But no,
No.
I totally agree. And it's interesting when you go back and talk about those stats from last season compared to this season. You can definitely see the over reliance on the 3 last year for Michigan State. As much as they struggled early on, we've talked about a number of times. We talked about quite a bit last year. It was the 3-point shooting that kept them in games, and that was their only solution. And also, if you look at the 2-point,
I would just, let me stop you there.
Sure.
I would say, I would expand that to say jump shooting in general, because it wasn't just threes. Michigan State was not a team that shot an excessive amount of threes. They were well below average in attempts. You might actually argue they maybe should have tried to figure out ways to get more. But what that team also did, in addition to that, is shoot a lot of 2-point jumpers. So they weren't in transition very much. So they weren't getting easy baskets at the rim that way. And they really didn't, absent AJ Hogard and Tyson Walker. Tyson Walker was effective attacking, but AJ Hogard was only intermittently so. He really had a terrible year converting at the rim. He shot 2s miserably. But other than that, it was a team that really just shot a lot of jumpers. And this is something I've been trying to articulate here since the season has started. The reason that this team, even though it doesn't have an obvious alpha scorer like they had with Tyson Walker last year, why this team quite probably, in my mind, is going to end up better offensively is they've got so much more variety in terms of the ways that they can score.
Yeah.
I think the biggest number added tonight was 28 for 32. That's the free throws made and free throws attempted.
Yeah.
That is something last year's team simply could not do. They are scoring much more consistently in transition, in my view. That's something last year's team did not do. I would even argue, although I'm not looking at Synergy or any other shot charting service to be certain of this, but anecdotally, it seems to me that they are more efficient so far in the post. They're not
Oh, no
dominating
question.
people, but yeah, you look at what Cooper and Kohler are doing compared to what they did last year, and it's much improved. And Zappala's giving them a little something in there too. So I
Yeah.
think it's across the board. It's a
Yeah.
better offensive team, but for the 3-point shooting.
Well, and I was just going to say, actually, the difference in the 2-point shooting, the nature of the 2-point shots is completely different last year. I mean, almost all of them are within 10 feet of the rim
Yep.
this year. And last
Right.
year, there were a lot of shots that were, frankly, 2-3 steps inside the 3-point line.
Yep.
And this is one of the things that people were talking about last year so much. Like, if only we had better fives, if only we had a post game, it would free up the shooters so they'd have open shots. Well, we're seeing a team that, again, does not have great post play. I mean, there are some post scoring. There are maybe like 4 buckets today in the post that were actually like post moves, maybe 3. But the fact that the guards are getting in the lane, they're attacking, there's way more space out on the 3-point line. They're not knocking them down. I mean, that's obvious, right?
Right.
But that those are the quality of those shots are so much better than last year, because I think of the 23 pointers they shot today, I'm going to say 3 of them were like ill-advised. I think Jace had one that was not very good. Tang had one where he's sort of fallen away, but for the most part, they were pretty wide open. They're just not hitting them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you think those ordinarily they're going to be hitting about 40% of those. So these are wide open threes. And again, I said it before, as soon as they get that figured, and you mentioned too, if they get that figured out, I mean, this team, it's going to be hard to figure out how to stop them, right? Because last year you just stop down 3, they're not going to hurt you inside. They can't really penetrate, aside from Tyson Walker, that's really the only guy you had to worry about. And now
part of the reason that they would struggle at times offensively is they didn't have a lot of diversity in terms of how they could score. Oh, and then they weren't getting second chance points last year either.
Right.
That's different thus far.
And that's also a reflection, I think, of the way you're shooting, right? When you're shooting at 5, 10 feet, 8 feet from the rim, it's causing way more opportunities for offensive rebounding than when you're shooting, 18-foot jumpers.
Absolutely.
Right. I think that's part of it too, helping the offensive rebounding rate.
But look, just to put a bow on this section of what we're talking about, I don't want to pretend that, hey, this was a glorious performance and everybody should celebrate. We're going to win the national title. No, but you can recognize several things are true at once. You continue to struggle in one area of offense, but everything else was once again good to outstanding. Literally everything else. Defensively, I think they had a bad half and then a much better second half. And truthfully, at least what we've got to go on over 4 games, I think the better half is closer to being indicative of what they actually are, because this is the first half is really the only bad half of defensive basketball I think they've played. And then you've also got to give credit to an opponent that just came out and made a lot of shots. And then when Michigan State was trying to deal with some of that, they exploited that adjustment very well by going by them. So credit to that team. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen Todd Simon's comments, but I'd kind of be surprised if he didn't think they played very, very well.
Yeah. No, I thought they played well. I think just, came down to a couple of plays at the end. And then it just sort of, as can happen when you're on away, you just get a little snowball action. And next thing you know, the game's over.
They couldn't do the thing that they've done exceptionally well thus far, which is shoot the 3.
Yeah.
They came in just shooting crazy good from 3, and they were at 19% today. Some of that was them missing shots, but some of that was Michigan State's defense. Believe that.
Yeah. I also think I think they got a little worn down. Their players, their starters were playing
That's
30
another,
plus minutes. And I
yes,
think that
yes.
really, especially, Johnson, I mean, he played 35 minutes. Credit to him for hanging in that long, but he was a turnstile on defense, especially in the second half. He really couldn't do much unless you isolated. He could kind of hang in there like just one on one, but he had trouble with the pick and roll and guards getting by him all the time. They weren't
You
able to convert
can
all the time.
you can argue that it's coincidental, I guess, but I think there's probably something to be said for why the game closed on an 18-0 run.
Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
and you're exactly right. When you look, they played a decent number of people, but when you look at the minute allocation, very heavy to the starters,
Yeah.
very heavy. And, Michigan State played 11 guys because Tang played tonight.
Mhm.
So Michigan State rolled out people, and you pretty much always had guys that were relatively fresh out there. And yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that the game ended that way. Um,
We can talk about, let's just talk about Jane Akins, I think specifically.
yeah,
Rough game last game against Kansas, where he kind of did everything but
yeah,
score and rebound, which is like, a lot of what they expect from him. Again, against, and if your opponent will say, not a Power Five school, but 32 minutes, 5 of 16 from the field. So not great, partly because it's 1 for 5 from three. Hit both his free throws, 12 rebounds, 3 of them offensive, 6 assists, a turnover, 2 steals, 13 points, leading the team. Strangely, there were 7 players in Michigan State in double digits, which is the first time since
yeah.
I think 2020 they've done that. But a great game from him, and he played well on both ends, and he played a good bounce back game. And hopefully this is, hopefully he can do this not only in against Bowling Green, but when the competition stiffens up a little bit too.
Well, Tom Izzo challenged him after the Kansas game by comparing him to Kansas guard Zeke Mayo, who had come into that game just shooting a blistering percentage from three. And Michigan State, in part, Jaden Akins specifically, really limited him, really shut him down. But the thing was, Mayo also guarded, and then he had double-digit rebounds. I think he had 6 or 7 assists. He did everything else well, even though he wasn't scoring.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Izzo had said was, look, Jaden has got so much to give this team, even on a night where the shot isn't falling. He's got to be able to contribute in other ways. Well, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, both led the team. Um, his shooting numbers from an efficiency point of view were not great, but I already mentioned he stuck probably the biggest shot of the night. That three took it from a 3-point game where you felt like, well, this is still very much in jeopardy, to all of a sudden the lead is 6, and you started to breathe, at least I did, started to breathe a lot
Yeah.
easier. It
Right.
was the
Yeah.
biggest shot of the night. And I think that I hope that's a confidence builder for him offensively. But it's all the other things, the way he defended, particularly in the second half. The rebounding number was crazy good. It's got to be a career high, I would think,
Has to
for
be.
him.
Yeah.
And 6 assists with, what do you have, 1 turnover or
One
0?
turnover. Yeah.
Yeah,
One.
pretty good, So I think this is one where, even though the efficiency is still not where you want it, you've got to say he played a very good game. He played a very good floor game. He gave Michigan State a lot of what they needed to win.
So a little interesting. I was not able to listen to the pregame, so I was not prepared for Jackson Kohler starting the game over Xavier Booker. Not surprising, I guess, the way he's been
No.
playing. Kohler finished 16 minutes offensively. He finished with 10 points, only 2 for 3 from the field, but 6 for 6 from the line, just
Yep.
3 defensive rebounds. He had a couple assists, no turnovers, a block and a steal, finished with 10 points. He was guarding that Johnson to begin with.
Yeah.
And again, watching him, they left him, they weren't doubling. And so I don't think it was bad defense most time. Johnson just hitting just kind of crazy shots where, these guys falling away from, like you said, 15 feet rainbow, he throws it 20 feet in the air and it falls straight in. I'm like, well, there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, there were a couple of those, but I will say, I thought of the guys who guarded Johnson, I did think Jax was the least effective. Now he battled.
Carr was the
He
worst, I think, because he was just too small.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough. I'm not, but comparing it between Jax and Carson Cooper and
Sure.
even Booker, who got some turns on him. I think Jack struggled the most. And look, it's for the reasons that I've been saying when people talk about playing him as a 5. Jack's he always plays his ass off. His effort level is not to be questioned,
Right.
but he lacks the kind of size and physical strength to really deal with truly big human beings. And usually that's what I'm mostly worried about is when that comes in, say, a 6'11 plus body.
Right.
But this was an example of a different kind of huge body where this guy was able to just work him into spots. Yeah, you could say, well, he's hitting a scoop shot up and under. He's hitting a fadeaway in the middle of the lane. But it seems pretty clear those are the spots he wants to get to. And I think ultimately that's how you measure it is, are you either able to deny him the ball enough or are you able to prevent him from getting to spots where he's comfortable? And, based on what we saw, I think we have to conclude that he wasn't able to do a good enough job in keeping him off those spots. Which again, I'm not blaming Jackson's effort. I think it's a physical tools thing.
Yeah.
He is going to be much better when he is guarding more normal 4 men who can't do that kind of stuff to him physically and just kind of swallow him up.
Yeah, I think his defense on the pick and rolls was pretty good. He's definitely gotten a lot better on that. And actually, to transition to Booker, I thought he's been much better defensively too. This game as well. Just offensively, he really struggled.
Izzo spoke about it. He's trying to find ways. First of all, you can say Jackson has earned the role, such as
Sure.
it is. Now, his minutes played, what was it, 16?
Yeah.
That's not, it's not like he played a ton. He
Nope.
actually played a little less than he has in some games where he's come off the bench.
Yep.
But I would expect that probably continues in the Samford game, where I would expect Jackson to start the next game because I don't think he did anything particularly badly enough to warrant not starting him. And, but Izzo said he's also trying to find ways to get Xavier Booker going. And he said he feels like he's been practicing better, meaning that his motor has been more consistent. But there's, you hope that he hit that first 3.
Yeah, I know.
You
He's
thought
like,
like,
oh, here we
okay,
go.
yeah, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But again, this was a tough game because even though his length, I think, gave him a weapon he could use against a kid like Johnson, I can understand why Izzo didn't want to go too deeply into that well, because Johnson's strength is something to behold. I mean, that kid, you want to talk about somebody knowing how to use their body?
Oh yeah.
That was a master class on that,
He's
and
like those guys people talk about at the YMCA,
yeah,
they can't,
absolutely.
right?
But we've seen a few guys like this, like last year, right? The kid
Yeah.
at North Carolina State, DJ Burns. He
Right.
was a bigger version of this. Now, I don't think Burns was quite as skilled as Johnson as a shooter, even though Johnson shot horribly tonight. He has shot very well in all their other games from deep. But there are some similarities there, and it really is a challenge to deal with a guy like that when you don't see anybody like, Michigan State doesn't have anybody like that.
No, right.
So you're
Can't
not
simulate
seeing
that.
guys like that every day, right? You can't simulate it very, very well. And it's not like he's in the Big Ten and you've seen him 3 times before. This was all, I mean, he wasn't even a D1 player last year.
Right.
But yeah, I can understand why they didn't go too deep with Book in this game. I don't think this was a particularly great matchup. The deal here was just trying to find whatever ways they could to survive this and then get what they needed at the other end. And they managed to do enough, but not without struggles.
And that kind of brings a little bit to Cooper. So he was probably best in Johnson, as you mentioned. 19 minutes played, 4 or 5 from the field,
Yep.
4 for 4 from the line, 2 rebounds only, one of them offensive, had a block, 12 points. Pretty solid game from him, and it's amazing
He's been good.
It's amazing how much better he is shooting when he's when he's getting in a better spot.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I thought in addition to the lob stuff, which helps, and they had
Hmm.
some of that again
Yeah,
tonight.
right.
He made one really good post move.
Yeah.
So I'm not ready to declare that, oh, now we've unlocked another element to Carson Cooper's game. But this is a career high for him in scoring. He had previously had a high of 10, which he had hit twice. Tonight he had 12. I thought defensively he was the best of the bunch by a considerable margin, actually, against Johnson. I don't know how it worked out in terms of um, what Johnson shot when he was actually guarding him, but anecdotally, it seemed to me he was the most effective. Not a ton of rebounds tonight, but sometimes that's just the way it goes. I thought Carson was really competitive, and look, he's being a productive player right now. If you're still complaining about Michigan State's fives, and I think everybody's gotten onto the new hobby horse of 3-point shooting, but if you're still complaining about Michigan State's fives, you really got to have your head examined, because thus far, collectively, if you include Kohler in that group, because he is playing there at least sometimes, but even if you take him out, even if you restrict it to Cooper and Zapala, they're giving Michigan State enough, in my opinion.
More positive than negative for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like
yeah,
a black hole. Zapal only played 14 minutes, had 5 rebounds, 2 for 2 from the field, and then three offensive rebounds. He was really good offensively
yep,
on the boards, and he didn't get a couple that he really kept in play. A couple
yeah.
assists, a turnover. I mean, I only 4 points, but I think he was pretty effective out there in a game that's, as you mentioned, is a little bit trickier for him because it's not like a traditional big that he's got to be guarding.
Exactly. This is not, that's what I was just going to say. This is not a game where Zapala is a card you're really glad you're able to play, because Bowling Green doesn't have a conventional center for him to try and deal with, or where you need him to deal with him. Um, Believe me, I'm seeing all the Big Ten teams as these non-conference games are happening, and it's going to be another year where there is just an endless parade of 6'10, 6'11, 7 foot, 7'2 guys that they're going to have to deal with. And Zapala is a very important piece of this overall equation, because he's another guy you can play and have at least a decent floor of what that's going to look like. You
It's
know?
interesting. You have Zapala played 14 minutes, Kohler played 16 minutes, and the another starter, Fiddler, only played 15 minutes. He was only 1 for 6 from the field, 0 for 5 from three, and all those
Yeah.
threes were good looks. 10 for
Yeah.
10 from the line. I mean,
Uh,
that's what we expected.
It's yeah, but
Frankie,
it's
3 rebounds.
he hasn't played a game yet where you look at it and you say, "Oh wow, he was really on it tonight." And yet you look up, I think he's averaging 12 points a game.
Right. It would, yeah.
So he's gonna get it turned around. The threes are going to fall certainly at a better clip than they have thus far. I'm confident of that. I still think there are things I would like to see Michigan State do more regularly with him, and really from the start of games. I would like to see them run a little more action. You saw one play they
Yeah. One
ran
curl he had. Yeah. It
off
was,
a baseline out of
mm-hmm.
bounds where he
Yeah.
rose up and hit it. He can hit those shots with regularity. That's a good mid-range jumper. We talked about fewer
Right.
of those so far this year, and that's true, but that's a quality shot. And he is fully capable of those pin down screens that Michigan State historically runs. I think they should be running more of that for him. I think they should be trying to get him the ball in isolation, maybe mid-range post-up situations where he can get somebody on his back and then decide to either back them in or face them up and try and take them that way. But I think there's a lot more there to get out of Frankie than they're getting right now. But the biggest thing is, and we talked about it from the moment they signed him. This guy has a knack for getting to the line, and when he gets there, he makes them. He shot, I think he was in the mid 80s or low 80s from the line last year. So it's no surprise that he could have a game where he goes 10 for 10 like he did tonight. And again, on nights where you feel like he isn't even playing particularly great, you look up and he's got 12 points.
Right.
That's And we're not used to it because Michigan State historically is not a team who does much from the free throw line. But the way you've got to think about it, what did he shoot from the floor in this
His
game?
1 for 6.
1 for 6. But truthfully, those are 5 possessions because he had 10 free throws. So 2 times 5.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's really more like 6 of 11 scoring opportunities
Right.
he
Right.
converted on.
Yeah. From you look at an efficiency standpoint. Yeah.
That's
right.
important. That matters. And again, it's not happenstance. It's not like, oh, well, it just so happened that, he was fortunate and he got lucky and he got fouled a few times. No, he plays that way. And it happens game after game after game after game. And at some point, you have to acknowledge, well, this is by intent. It's by design. And that is the truth. So, I mean, look, he needs to shoot better. I'm not going to argue that point. But
join the club.
I'm okay. Well, yeah, join the club. But also, if you're going to have it, like we talked about with Jaden Akins, if you're going to have a night where you're struggling from the floor, you need to bring other things to the equation to make yourself an overall positive contributor.
Right.
And he's doing that.
Right. Jeremy Fears, 21 minutes, 2 for 4 from the field, 1 for 1 for 3. He's perfect from 3, 5 for 6 from the line. So he had contributed one of the few misses that they had from the free throw line. Had a rebound, 5 assists, 5 turnovers, a couple steals, 10 points, a couple really bad turnovers. He just kind of likes going a little too fast sometimes. And I just, it's easy to forget sometimes that he is a freshman. I mean, I know he's redshirt freshman, whatever, but he has, so it's still real early in his career. So not that you want those things, but it's, a little more forgivable, I think.
Here's what I'll say about Jeremy. I thought he really bounced back from a tough half. I thought the first half was the worst he'd played yet this year. And then he turned around and had a really good second half overall. Look, the 5 turnovers, very uncharacteristic of him. And they were mostly just bad. I mean, they were just inexplicable decisions.
Yeah, the one at the end of the second half where that kind of, I think Bowling went up 4 because they just kind of threw it away almost to them. It was
he
weird.
doesn't make those kind of decisions typically. And he did tonight. So that was a struggle. But I thought he was much better defensively in the second half. I thought his playmaking showed up, obviously. 5 turnovers, yeah, that's what, but he did have 5 assists. Mm-hmm. So his playmaking was more or less, little below average, but more or less in the pocket of what we expect him to do. It's just he was a little looser with the ball than we typically see. And then, what was it, 5 for 6 at the line, right?
Yeah.
That's big. That's big. And hitting the 3 is nice, but stepping to the line, first of all, it's an area, being able to hit jumpers is an area where Jeremy does need to show improvement. But when you can step to the line and shoot like that, that is usually an indicator that eventually your shot from the floor will come. Your jumper will come around to some extent. So I think that's the fact that I think he is a good free throw shooter. Is an indicator that that's likely to happen. But again, the fact that he had 6 attempts, I mean, and he's getting to the line, not quite as much as Fiddler, but close enough. He's definitely making his presence felt in that way. So I'm really happy with the way he responded in the second half. And, the good news in the first half was that it was okay because, again, Michigan State's depth is such. If one guy is struggling, there's probably going to be somebody else who's able to fill those contributions. And that absolutely was the case in this game with Trey Holloman.
Yeah, 25 minutes, 5 for 9 for the field, 1 for 3 for 3. Hit that first 3. And again, they were like 2 for 2 from 3. And then you thought, oh, here we go. And,
right.
So 3 rebounds, 1 of them offensive, 3 assists, no turnovers, 4 blocks, 11 points. And he's what kept them in it in the first half. He kept that game within touch. Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's in the first half, Jeremy Fears wasn't playing well. Trey Holloman comes in and, as you say, keeps them in it because he played a high level half. Second half, Jeremy Fears was much better. They didn't need as much from Trey. And so he didn't, I think he had 9 points in the first half and 2 in the second, I think. But overall, quietly, because I think Jaden Akins has been sucking up so much of the negative attention. I don't think there was enough of an appreciation for the fact that Trey Holloman hadn't played particularly
Yeah.
well this year either. He had not had really one game that I thought was at the level of what we know he's capable of playing. Well, tonight he played at that level.
Yeah,
This was
exactly.
really good.
I agree.
So that was as much as I'm glad that Jade contributed the way he contributed in totality, I'm just as happy, and I think it's pretty close to being just as important that MSU got this level of game from Trey Holloman so he can get his confidence going.
Yeah, you'd hope your captains play like they did today. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Jace Richardson had 19 minutes, 0 for 1 from the field, kind of an ill-advised 3. He had a couple of defensive rebounds, assist, no turnovers, no points. One of those, just offensively, he didn't really add much to the game, which he'd been sort of on a burner at the first 3 games of the season. So he kind of showed his mortality today, but he didn't play a bad game. He just was offensively just not doing much.
No, he tried on a few occasions to make something happen. And credit Bowling Green. I thought they defended him pretty well. He wasn't able to get past people, which he's been doing
right
lately. But as I said, when it was money time, who stepped up with a great play, great penetration, made the right kick to an open Jaden Akins. And here's the other thing, what I liked about that play, and it's subtle, but anybody who's played, anybody who's shot a basketball, particularly under game conditions, knows what I'm talking about. I thought one thing that was sort of off today with Michigan State, even on a lot of these shots that were open, is the passes were not on time and delivered in the pocket.
Right.
There were a few occasions I can think of in this game where a pass got delivered, but the shooter had to reach for it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still open, but it takes you out of that rhythm. That play that Jace Richardson made, not only did he make the move off the dribble to draw defenders, but he delivered that pass right in the shooting pocket. That's a very subtle, small thing, but believe me, it matters. And it is not surprising in the slightest that Jace Richardson did it, because that's who he's been so far. He just does the right things. I'll also say this. He didn't force anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's easy for someone, especially a young player who's had some success. The team might be struggling, feel like they need a spark. And for such a player to take it on his shoulders and try to make it happen himself and hurt the team by virtue of doing so. Jace didn't do that. He didn't ever get outside of himself in this game. So, yeah, more of a muted contribution than what we've seen thus far, but I'm still really happy with where he's at.
And the final one we need to talk about, who played the second most minutes for the team, is Cone Carr, 27 minutes, 5 for 8 from the field. 1 for 4 from the line. So he was contributed almost all the misses from the free throw line for the team.
Yeah.
The 32 free throws, 5 rebounds, 2 of them offensive. One of them very loud, where it was a putback dunk. A couple turnovers where he was going a little too fast, as he's still trying to kind of figure out how to, I think, drive in the lane, especially a bunch of hands. Had a steal, 11 points. Still not his career high, which is ironically his very first game was against James Madison last season, where he's not yet matched that, but the impact he brings to the game now, played 27 minutes. You can see why they have him out there. He is loud and is how far he has come defensively from last year is really remarkable. I mean, Booker's come a ways, but Carr really so much more so.
Yeah. You could make a pretty good argument. I mean, I talked about Jaden Akins' shot being the biggest shot tonight, but pretty clearly the biggest sequence was that stretch where Cohen had back-to-back dunks that
forced a timeout. Yeah.
Stephen Bardo on, I can't remember whether it was the first or the second one, lost his mind because Cohen Carr's head was well above the rim. And, he said, and let's remember, he played for a team that was nicknamed the Flying Illini. Right. That was his era. And he said, I played with a lot of guys who were great athletes. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
That was impressive. And it was a momentum. I mean, that Cohen Carr is a guy who's capable of making those ultra loud plays. And God knows we've seen it enough over the years at Michigan State with guys who are capable of having those moments that you can literally feel the momentum shift in a game.
Yeah.
And that didn't end the game because Bowling Green actually was able to get off the mat after
Yeah.
that
Take a
and
lead.
retake
Yeah.
a lead.
Mhm.
But it was still, I think, really critical for Michigan State staying in the game to claw its way back into a lead again. Um, and Cohen, I think Cohen's playing very well right now. Um, we're seeing what was he took 4 free throws? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's okay. I mean, you'd like him to hit more than one, but the fact that he's getting there regularly now, I don't know what he's averaging, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's averaging 4 free throw attempts a game because it seems like every game he's getting there at least a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
That's indicative of the mentality that he's playing with. And you saw all those dunks tonight. He is looking to get to the basket. Even the turnovers, like you say, they weren't, they need to be better plays, but his mentality is exactly where it needs to be. Like he
Yeah.
is looking to make something happen. And we've seen enough to suggest that he is capable of making those things happen often enough that you'd say, yeah, I want him playing with that kind of confidence, that kind of aggression, because good things are going to happen far more often than the converse.
I tell you that one ref he called it 2, maybe 3 times where clearly players were in the act or they'd already stopped dribbling, were like taking a step and not getting continuation of those calls. It's crazy,
Well,
but whatever.
I will tell you that there were a couple of them that on replay, and I'm no friend of the officials. There were a couple of those. The last one that Cohen had, I remember, in real time looked like a terrible call. When you slowed it down, it actually probably was the right call. But I do think there were one or two of those that did get missed. So they weren't all called perfectly.
We'll move along and talk about the player that Michigan State need to keep in the gutter. Brought to you by the Brothers Chester Gutters. I'm actually very excited. Next game, Sanford Gate. I get to hang out with both brothers, so I get to be there with Kurt
Okay.
and Greg. We'll get to meet for the first time and together at the game. So if you need gutter work done, talk to the brothers. They can take care of it. Whatever you need done, whether just clean out the leaves that you don't want to clean out yourself. We've got the plugged up gutters, maybe your problems, your downspouts, maybe you're got a leaky gutter, maybe you need something replaced, repaired, whatever it might be. They can take care of it, whether it's on your house, your business. The brothers can take care of the job. They only do gutters. So they'll get on the ladders for you. So you don't have to do that. They don't try and upsell you with other stuff. They only do gutters. So call the brothers. If you have any question about that, they can come out and take a look at your place and give you an estimate. As a listener to the show, you get 10% off if you mention Final Four when they come for your estimate. And the player that we had pegged as a player that Michigan State needed to keep in the gutter was Javante Campbell, who played 37 minutes, 6 for 13 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, had 2 or 3 from the line, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 turnovers, finished with 14 points. I think largely they kept him in check. He got in the first half, he was definitely getting to the rack quite a bit, but they shut that down in the second half. I felt like a lot better.
Much better in the second half. Look, held him about 5 points, 4.5 points below his average. So, slight positive. I can't say they completely shut him down by any means, but he's a good player. And I'll say this, the one problem he's got, he would be even more lethal if he had a reliable deep shot.
Yeah.
And he was 2 for 4 on the season coming in. So now he's 2 for 7. If he can find that with more, but he doesn't look to me like he wants to take those shots.
Yeah.
So that might be a little bit of a problem for him continuing to be quite that level of scorer. But overall, I think he's a nice player. He and Johnson are exactly, when you looked at the stats, and well, this is the number 1 and 2 scorer. They're both new guys to the program.
Yeah.
One's from a JUCO, one's from D2. Boy, it goes to show you, as we touched on in the preview, we are in this era where you just have to recognize that in large part because of what the portal has created, it has become easier for D1 programs to take quote unquote chances on guys. And what you're seeing more of these kind of scenarios unfold where a guy who, for whatever reason, and in his case, maybe it's that, well, he hadn't proven that he could shoot well enough to have D1 programs, or maybe he had academic issues and that's why he went JUCO. I don't know. But you see that at the very least, is he capable of competing at a very effective level as a D1 basketball player? Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Also, he averaged 6 free throws a game. He only had 3 this game, and I think they just came very late. So
Yep.
that just
Didn't
shows
foul him. Yep.
it goes to the fact that they just were able to keep him neutralized, at least from getting in the lane and causing a lot of problems. So then, player that cleans the glass best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you want Troy and your team to take care of your glass at home, they can clean it great. They can also power wash your house. They can do some interior painting now too. So in the winter months, if you need some touch up work done inside, they can also handle that too. 15% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. You get estimates for either Brothers Suggest Your Gutters or for the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. If you go to our support page at the Final Fours on the schedule.com and /support, I can do nothing but recommend the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They did a fantastic job when they took care of our house, and I'm sure they can do the same for you. Call them today. You'll be glad you did. And they sponsor the player that cleans the glass best, as I mentioned. Right now it's tied 1-1. I had Jackson Kohler, who barely had any rebounds. I think he had 3. And you had Shimon Sapala, who had 5. You made quite the convincing case for Jaden Akins, who had 12, but then you could talk yourself out of it and went with Sapala with 5.
Yeah,
so
I think I should get half a point.
yeah,
No,
you'll be awarded 0 points.
no, but it's but it was true. Now
You're right.
Jaden also had 3 offensive rebounds,
Yes.
which is impressive, and it's something he's capable of doing. But the fact that he had 9 defensive rebounds on a night where Bowling Green attempted 26 threes and missed 21 of them, I think that had a lot to do with why his numbers were where they were. But really good performance from him, no doubt. Very impressive.
Well, that'll bring us to the keys to the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing, where you want to get your Spartan apparel. They have a huge selection, all kinds of things like quarter zips. They've got coats. They've got t-shirts, hoodies, whatever you need. They've got it. They've got cool hats now. You want to go to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. You get 20% off as a listener to the show if you type in Final Four, just as one word at checkout. The great shipping deals. If you want something made for like a fundraiser, they have Fabricated Customs, which you can go to fabricatedcustoms.com. And there you can also get the same deal where they do all the screen printing just here locally in Michigan and Portland. They ship it out to you. They take care of all the money. They do everything. It is the best experience for a fundraiser. It was so easy compared to how it usually is. Just ask Rod. He just loved this way. It keeps him out of the post office, which he is very happy to do. So first key of the game. Well, shoot the rock. I think we can safely say that was a failure. Shooting 20% from the line, from behind the arc.
Look, there's not a lot more to say about it. I mean, they continue to generate pretty good looks, and you just gotta keep doing it. I mean, what you can't do, what would be problematic is if you did see Michigan State get overly gun shy and start passing on open looks. That will make things worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it really will. They've just they shot their way into this. They got to shoot their way out of it. There's nothing more to say.
Yep. I would only say the first half, Jeremy Fears had 2 wide open threes. He passed out and gave other people wide open shots. It's not like he didn't have them. We would see that last year's occasion would see someone who have a 3 pass it out, and then it was not quite as open, and then they would miss. And he hit his 1-3 in the second half. So I wonder if he starts getting a little bit, they encourage him to take that shot if it's wide open, but whatever. Again, like you said, just got to shoot out. But second key to the game is tempo. Again, I thought I know this is more about the fast break, and Michigan State had 15 fast break points. I thought they got in the fast break as much as they could. It was hard in the first half, especially since Bowling Green wasn't missing. And so there weren't many opportunities. So they got 13 second chance points on the four. Oh, that's something different. Sorry. So 15 fast break points to, I think, Bowling Green had about 13 or 14, so it was pretty even there.
Yeah,
But I think it probably contributed a little bit to them wearing down at the end of the game.
100%. This was a game that, as we thought it probably would be, was played at a very fast pace because we knew Bowling Green wants to play fast, and sure enough, they did that. And Michigan State wants to play fast. But something we didn't really talk about very much, but I think ended up playing out in this game is what you just alluded to. I think because the game was played that fast for its entirety, and Bowling Green really was relying on their starters
Yeah.
in a much heavier fashion than Michigan State, it started to show up in the last, say, 6 minutes or so of the game. I think it really did. And I think that's, you saw Bowling Green missing some looks from three. You saw some turnovers. You
Mm-hmm.
saw maybe the defense wasn't quite as sharp as it had been. Just little things, little gaps or big gaps in the case of missed shots that reflect a physical toll that has been taken on an opponent. And I do think that the fact that the game was played that fast and combining that with the nature of the minutes played really did cut to Michigan State's advantage. You're right. In the first half, it was hard to not so much because Bowling Green was doing a great job of balancing the floor, but just they were hitting shots. So, and they were good enough. They were good enough in terms of floor balance to not be in situations where Michigan State was able to hit them with the counter blitz.
Right.
Off a made basket.
They
But
were ready for that. It looked like
yeah, but yeah, I think Michigan State once again. Look, you can't complain about the tempo they're playing at.
Well, and
Again,
again,
not many. There were no shot clock violations. There
there's
really
one under
wasn't.
5, I think. I
Yeah,
think one the whole game.
there
Yeah.
wasn't much of anything that was particularly close. So
Yep.
happy about that.
Third key to the game was attack. Well, I think that's clear. Michigan State had 32 free throw attempts. Probably 6 of them were just guys who getting kind of bumped outside, who were, outside the arc, which really weren't involved with anything. Except, I think Bowling Green especially got really aggressive, especially in that they were getting more and more aggressive and physical that first half. Until they started calling a few fouls. But anyway, obviously attacking the rim, and Fiddler with 10 free throws, and none of his were cheap ones. They were almost all going into trying to score.
But you look at this. So Fiddler 10 for 10, Fears 5 for 6, Kohler 6 for 6, Cooper 4 for 4, and then Carr 1 for 4. That's a lot of guys taking a lot of free throws.
Yeah.
I think Michigan State earned that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And again, it's something that we are seeing show up game in, game out. It's not an accident. Now, are they going to be able to keep this up on a game in, game out basis throughout the entire course of the season? That's the challenge. But right now, this is the thing that is allowing them to ride out 20% 3-point shooting.
Exactly.
More than anything else, it's that.
Yep.
Because they are still getting points, and they're getting easy points. They're getting points with the shot, with the clock stopped, and with a defender not in the shooter's face.
Yeah.
Right. They're the easiest points that are there to be made, other than perhaps in transition. If you can literally beat the opponent down the floor and you don't have a defender to deal with, I guess that's maybe even easier, but it's pretty close to the easiest.
Yeah.
And it's a really important element, and it's been there so far every single game.
Well, I think, we talked about, I think they had 36 points off free throws and transition against Kansas. This game, they had 43. And so, those,
that's like half your offensive production,
yeah,
right? It's exactly half.
Yeah. The fourth key to the game was guarding the arc. And largely aside from them hitting a couple of threes early and then twice fouling Kayat on his threes, that was kind of like another 6 points, I guess, but for the most part, I think they did a pretty good job contesting most of those threes and not making them easy. And I wonder too, with Ed Johnson, if his success hitting the threes, I mean, he's hitting them, no question, in the previous games, but I wonder if he was not playing teams with 4s who could go out and counter that, or at least challenge him on those threes as much as we say.
Quite possibly. And here's the thing, what makes it even weirder, they made 5s a team. Sam Towns went 2 for 2 from three. He's not a 3-point shooter.
Right.
Hasn't ever been a 3-point shooter. So that struck me as a little fluky. The guys you would expect, Trey Thomas, 2 for 7. Campbell, 0 for 3. Kyatt didn't even get an attempt. Johnson, 1 for 11. That was a big one. Butler, 0 for 2. Humphrey, 0 for 1. Obviously the Johnson numbers stick out.
Yeah.
When you have one guy miss 10 3-point attempts, that's a lot. But overall, you've got to be happy with this, because we had said, and it's usually the case, especially when it's not just the strategy that makes the most sense in a basic level, which is always, if you're the lesser talented team, the 3-point shot is a great equalizer, right? But it also happened to play particularly into Bowling Green's seeming strength as a team, where they had just been blistering hot from three in their first 3 games. So it made all the sense in the world. And we had said they don't normally take an excessive number of threes, but in a game like this, I could see them being tempted to maybe take more than usual. Well, that's what happened. They had 26 attempts. They just couldn't hit them. And I think Michigan State had a lot to do with that. And Michigan State was so focused on that, in my opinion, that I think it did create some other defensive issues for a while.
Yeah.
Until they managed to shore that up too.
Yep. I agree. Well, the fifth and final key was offensive rebounding. I think we can, maybe it's a little too early to call it, but I think we can safely say that Michigan State is a very good rebounding team this year. I mean, there are a lot of people contribute to it. It's not just one player, and as we struggle trying to figure who's going to be the best rebounder, but also not only they're good defensively, which they have been. They held Bowling Green to 25% or a little bit less of offensive rebounding rate, but they also have been another fantastic offensive rebounding chance where they almost 50%. I think
44.
15 to 32 misses or something like that. So
44%.
Another great performance.
Yeah, they're doing it. We've been focusing a lot on the offensive side, but let's also give credit to what they're doing as a defensive rebounding unit, because you're right. It's both ends, and it's been a while since we could say that. Yeah. There were even some of the most recent seasons, which frankly you have to go back, 5 years, 6 years now, but even some of the most recent seasons where they were very good as an offensive rebounding team. So say when Xavier Tillman was playing, the defensive end was not great. It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't great. And to see them thus far handling their business at both ends, that's impressive. We'll see if that can continue. But early returns are very, very solid. And here's another thing. They're rebounding defensively this way while also having, I think they're 73rd right now in block percentage. So they're blocking a fair amount of shots.
And that's not a usual Michigan State strategy, right?
It has been in more recent years. Yeah. Because it never used to be. For at least the first, I'd say 2/3 of Tom Izzo's career, it wasn't, but that started to change. If you think about like the Jaren Jackson team, that was obviously a team that went crazy with shot blocks. But then even after he left, the Tillman years, those teams blocked a lot of shots. When Marcus Bingham, to those teams. So it wasn't so much of a factor last season, but the 4 or 5, 6 years before that, it actually had started to become one. But here's the deal. When you do that, and the reason Izzo always used to not do it, but I think felt like he had to change because of changes in the rule emphasis. It had to do with freedom of movement and guys being able to drive with impunity. And so what are you going to do about that? Well, you have to offer something that discourages that. And it's shot blocking is usually the way you get that done. Right. But Izzo was never a believer in that, because when you have an emphasis on shot blocking, it's very easy to take yourself out of position, right, to get a defensive rebound. The fact that Michigan State in the early going is both blocking there's a decent level of rim protection going on, and they're also getting defensive rebounds corralled. Very good sign that they're balancing those two interests very, very well thus far. But, specifically, we were talking about offensive rebounds, and hey, 44% is a rate you'd take in any game.
Yep. So we'll see. They of course were 25% against Kansas. So we'll see how they do when they get stiffer competition when they get to Maui. So I
Maui's
think
going to be, yeah,
that'll be sort of
Maui's,
bellwether to
yeah.
sort of where this team is and where, against regular
In a lot of
competition.
ways, it's going to be rebounding stuff. Can they continue to get to the line at anything close? To Kansas, they did a good job there. It wasn't quite at the level they've been at in these other games, but that's also not surprising. It doesn't have to be 32 free throw attempts per game to be a big positive.
Yeah.
So you're right. Maui's going to be the next. That's not to discount Samford, but Maui's going to be the next time you're playing, roughly peer level programs. And we're going to find out the answer to some of these things.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. I want to encourage you to check out our support page, the Final Four schedule.com/support. There you can find any of our sponsors, ways to support the show. If you appreciate our content, you can drop a dime our way. You can also find make sure you support the show too by leaving written reviews on your podcast player. And so we'll be turning around real quick as we get the pregame for Samford. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.